Well, shalom, brothers and sisters. This is your brother Martin, coming to you with the last video in the series on the last 12 books of Isaiah. And this one is a ringer. It's been almost a month since the last video in this series. And for those of you who haven't been on the channel or are just finding this channel, this is the last in a series of videos that I'm doing on the last 12 books of Isaiah. And that in itself is the culmination of a series of videos I was told to do by our Heavenly Father about the fourth beast and the judgment of that fourth beast and the clips that dealt with that, which was the part 1 and part 2 video that you see down here. And these are all the videos in the series. So this started last summer in 2023, July 22. So if you want to go back on my channel and watch these videos in order, you might find that helpful. That said, if you've been following along, this is the last video on the last 2 books in Isaiah. And before I get any further, I always put out this disclaimer. This is not about me. I'm not trying to act smart here. My job is to put the information out there. I've been given words by the Father to include here. This particular video, it was not just me. Many of my brothers and sisters were given words that we cross-correlated, and then we were told to find certain things in Bible codes, and I even consulted with some other code searchers about codes they did 4 or 5 years ago. So boy, there's a lot in this video. So with that said, my job is to put the information out there. Whether you receive it or not is not up to me. And it's not about being right or wrong. I'm not really here to argue about right or wrong. My job is to put the information out there. And if you've landed on this channel, then you must be here for a reason. So just consider the content in this video, and I hope that it blesses you in your walk. So we're going to start with the first, those last 2 books of Isaiah, 65, 66, not books, chapters in the book of Isaiah. And based on the words received by myself and many of my cohort, we're also going to go into the book of Enoch, which is super interesting, and you'll see why it was removed from the Bible. Although I won't get into sort of everything about the book of Enoch, I'm only going to cover the part relevant to this discussion, which gets into the new earth and the new heaven, which will then lead us to the last couple of chapters of Revelation, which then talks about the New Jerusalem. And we will, while we discuss the New Jerusalem, we will talk about the proxy for the New Jerusalem during the 1,000-year reign, which is called Yahweh Shama, or Yahuwah is there. So, again, to introduce the topic of the book of Isaiah, I always ask the question, why the book of Isaiah? Well, it's because we know that the book of Isaiah has not been changed. It is the only complete book to be found, the entire scroll found in the Dead Sea Scrolls in Qumran in 1947. And when we look at that, we can see we have the Babylonian flame letter Hebrew here, and then we have in these 4 characters the tetragrammaton of the creator of the universe, the Heavenly Father. And this is Paleo Hebrew for Yod He Wah He, or hand behold, nail behold. So I actually have a video that covers his name, and another video that covers the fact that his name's been changed. So I will link those videos in the description below this, and you can take a look at those if you're interested. All right, that said, let's get into the last 2 chapters of the book of Isaiah. So as usual with the other Isaiah studies I've done, I'm going to read and then I will go to my notes. These notes were prepared when I was doing a study with a group looking at the book of Isaiah 4 years ago or so. What I show as an interpretation is not that far away from the strict Jewish interpretation of the book of Isaiah. But mainly I'm trying to make the text clear so you understand what Isaiah is saying, because he's speaking as some 1,000 of years ago, in the desert. So he is now writing down the words Yahuwah is giving him, the Heavenly Father, and this is what Yahuwah says through his prophet Isaiah. I have let myself be inquired of, not by those who asked. I was found, not by those who sought me. I said, here I am, to a nation not calling on my name. I have held out my hands all day long to a stubborn people who walk in a way that is not good, after their own thoughts. So let's go to the notes. So for verses 1 and 2, the ones in the Exodus inquired, meaning the Exodus out of Egypt. But now when he's speaking in the time of Isaiah, this group is not. They're stiff-necked, and because they don't call on his name, it takes them longer to be saved. Most people did not invoke his name, and this now is the ancient fulfillment of what he's saying, but the modern fulfillment is now in the end of days. We have the same thing where people are not calling on his name. And he's saying he was available at the time the servant performed his mission, meaning the Messiah, but people didn't call on his name. They followed their own imagination. They have duped themselves with imaginations of their own heart. So he goes in to describe those people who are duping themselves with imaginations of their own heart. The people who provoke me continually to my face, who slaughter in gardens and burn incense on altars of brick, who sit among the graves and spend the night in secret places, who eat flesh of pigs and the broth of unclean meat in their pots. So this verse 3, provoking him, or is it a manifestation of the occult? Is it satanic? Is it harmless? Whatever degree it is, it provokes him, which is not good. He expects a peculiar people set apart from the world. Instead, he gets people that are very interested in, burning incense to other idols, who don't care what the Bible says about what you should eat and what you should consider unclean. They eat whatever they want. And this is not just about actual physical eating, but this is also swallowing philosophies of men, right? It's that they're letting themselves be duped. And we could say that about our time. People are letting themselves be duped. Who say, keep to yourself, do not come near me, meaning they're saying this to Yahuwah, for I am set apart to you. These are smoke in my nostrils, a fire that burns all day. See, it is written before me, I am not silent, but shall repay, and I shall repay into their bosom. And so what he's saying is, this group that's doing these abominations, not only are they doing these abominations, they're saying to those that aren't, keep away from me, because I don't want to deal with you, because you try and reprove me to say you shouldn't be doing these abominations, and who are you to tell me what to do? So in short, this proud group doing these abominations think they are better than the elect, because they reprove the elect, saying, why are you trying to correct me? So now again, Yahuwah speaking to that group doing the abominations. Your crookedness and the crookedness of your fathers together, said Yahuwah, who burned incense on the mountains and reproached me on the hills, and I shall measure their former work into their bosom. Thus said Yahuwah, as the new wine is found in the cluster, and one shall say, do not destroy it, for there is blessing in it, so I do for my servants' sake, not to destroy them all. So this imagery here evokes the harvest of the earth. He's talking about wine. He's talking about the fact that the old wine might be spoiled, but the new wine could still be good. So therefore, he's not going to destroy everything. And Isaiah is essentially referencing the remnant, the 144,000, the elect, the set-apart groups. I'm not going to make a distinction between one versus the other. These are the set-apart groups. And I shall bring forth a seed from Jacob, and from Yehuda, Judah, an heir of my mountains, and my chosen ones shall inherit, and my servants dwell there. And Sharon shall be a fold of flocks, and the valley of Achor a place for herds to lie down, for my people who have sought me, for those who have sought him. So offspring implies something. The whole earth becomes a promised land. The servants are the chosen ones. They inherit twofold. Because they are the offspring, and because they are chosen, they inherit twofold. Meaning, they receive the priesthood and the office of kings. He gives us qualifiers to know what we need to do to qualify for that inheritance. Those who seek him qualify for that inheritance and are set apart. But you are those who forsake Yahuwah, who forget my set-apart mountain, who prepare a table for God, and who fill a drink offering for many. Now, this is interesting. And what's interesting about it, first off, he says, you are not these Kodesh people I was talking about just now. You chose what was not my will. You are doing these things which I think are abominations. You prepare a table for God, which if you've seen my video on who is God in the Bible, you will know is Gadriel, a fallen angel, and who fill a drink offering for many. Now this is often completely mistranslated into English, and I did an entire video on this years ago during COVID to explain what this means in the context of what we just went through and the duping that happened then. And I will get into that in just a second. But he says to these ones that are not his set apart, that are choosing things that are not his will and preparing a table for God, and I shall allot you to the sword and let you all bow down to the slaughter, because I called and you did not answer. I spoke and you did not hear, and you did evil before my eyes and chose that in which I did not delight. So let's get into this 11 and 12 of chapter 65. And I will link the video I did back in 2021 in COVID, which talks about this, right? So these verses here, you chose what was not my will. Those are the wicked ones. And there's three categories of people that he's talking about in chapter 65. We have the servant category, which are the Kodesh, which means set apart, or the elect. The Sion category, which is the ones who receive salvation, they're in the middle. They're caught between the wicked and the elect. They go through tribulation. And the wicked, which are destroyed. That's simple. The wicked are destroyed. He says that over and over again. In 12, he says, I will give you to the sword. You will be destroyed. Now that last verse in 11 is sometimes translated, if you look in the KJV, I believe it's translated this way, to be pour mixed wine for fortune, because God is the God of fortune. And so this verse here, fill a drink offering for many, is sometimes translated pour mixed wine for fortune. And when the servant called, they did not receive. And Yahuwah gives revelation through his servants. But what happens is, because these wicked are doing these things, the wickedness helps the elect ascend higher, because the elect have to deal with that wickedness. And they receive more holiness because of that. So let's look at these verses in the context of what I recorded in that video that I've linked, that Isaiah 65:11 speaks to today's Christians. Remember, again, recorded during the time of COVID. So the definition of that word many in 65:11, which talks about the goddess of fortune, but it's not, it's Gadriel, is that it is the name of a people synonymous with what they worship. Money. Worship money. So you'll see in that video, if you go and watch it, that when you look at the Hebrew here in 65:11, which is often mistranslated, as I said, you will find that the ones arranging a table for God are also filling this word blend, which is actually mem samic kuf, which is mask. From the mask. They're filling from the mask. So what this really means, and I believe this and have received confirmations, is that the ones he's describing are setting a table for God and wearing the mask for money. That's what this is. And if during COVID you went along with it and wore the mask, well, he may be talking to you, because you've allowed yourself to be duped, as many are finding out. So with that said, I'm just going to move on, and you can consider what Isaiah 65:11 is really saying here in the Hebrew when I point that out. But that's not the point of this video. So let's get back to discussing what Isaiah is saying in chapter 65. So moving on to verse 13. Therefore, thus said the Master Yahuwah, see, my servants eat, but you hunger. So he's saying to the wicked ones, my servants, the holy ones, eat, but you hunger. See, my servants drink, but you thirst. See, my servants rejoice, but you are put to shame. Why is that? See, my servants sing for joy of heart, but you cry for sorrow of heart, and wail for breaking of spirit. And you shall leave your name as a curse to my chosen, for the Master Yahuwah shall put you to death, and call his servants by another name. As I said, the wicked ones will be destroyed. He says so right here. But he's also saying that his holy ones will receive a new name. So if we go through the notes for 13 through 15, there's a huge dichotomy between the righteous and the wicked. The covenant righteous receive blessings and not the curses the wicked ones receive. And this is not just physical, but it's spiritual, right? You see that you chose wrong because you're receiving curses, and you see that others are receiving blessings. So cause and effect. Why are you receiving the curses? But instead of reproving yourself and saying, what did I do to receive these curses? You're simply blaming Yahuwah for your bad fortune. So you are now setting a table for God, the idol of fortune. And that only makes it worse. You're dismayed because you thought there were no consequences. But there are consequences. And he's telling you there are consequences. And he says the ultimate consequence is he will put you to death. The real death, the second death. Like the people of Sodom, it's a curse, a group of people whose iniquity was whole. And so therefore they were destroyed by fire. That's what happened in Sodom. On the other hand, the servants are not destroyed. They get a new name, and all of the ones whose iniquity was whole are forgotten. That's what he says. You shall leave your name as a curse, so that when people look upon you, they will see why you were cursed. So let's go to 16. So that he who blesses himself in the earth does bless himself in the Elohim of truth. And he who swears in the earth does swear by the Elohim of truth, because the former distresses shall be forgotten, and because they shall be hidden from my eyes. What does this say? Well, there are those in the world praying for a blessing. You have the earth versus the world. And sometimes also the word nations used for the world. Yahuwah is the creator of heavens and earth. Right? That's who he is. Gadriel, this one, which is the god and goddess of fortune, is the creator of the world. The world, or the nations, are superimposed upon the earth. The earth is all the things natural that Yahuwah made, the heavens and the earth. The world is synonymous with the beast. It is superimposed. It is all of the things built with money, authority, lawyers, guns, and sorcery. And we'll the Isaiah will speak to what sorcery that is. And so does Revelation, and we'll cover that in just a minute. But that's the separation. If you are duped by the world, then you do not bless yourself in the earth. Yahuwah's creation is the earth. Godriel's creation is the world. If you rely on the world, and this is what when Yahushua said, be in the world, not of it, that's what he meant. Be of the earth, but in the world, because you're in the 3D physical, and you can't help it because Godriel has imposed the world and superimposed it on the earth. But ultimately the world will be destroyed and the earth will remain, and there will be a new earth. So it is it is part of what it means to be a servant, that you are blessing yourself in the earth and swearing by the Elohim of truth, not by the creator of the world. Because all of those things, all of the distresses that the world creates through money and lawyers and all the crap, shall be forgotten. And then all of the sins that you were duped into will be hidden from his eyes, as long as you are not destroyed along with the world. That's why you do not be of the world. You're just in the world because you can't help it. For look, I am creating new heavens and a new earth, and the former shall not be remembered nor come to heart. Right? Yahuwah remakes the heavens and the earth as new. Everything is new. This world won't be remembered. And especially the superimposed world Godriel has created will not be remembered. But be glad and rejoice forever in what I create. For look, I create Jerusalem, a rejoicing, and her people a joy. This Jerusalem is not the city in the Middle East. And we're going to talk about that. What we're talking about is people on the Sion level, the ones that are saved, but that are stuck between the elect and the wicked. And so it's not Israel, meaning the lost sheep of the house of Israel. They are sifted in the tribulation and harvested in various harvests. And once they make it through that, they have an everlasting happiness. Okay, moving on. Verse 19, and I shall rejoice in Jerusalem, and shall joy in my people, and let the voice of weeping no more be heard in her, nor the voice of crying. No more is an infant from there going to live but a few days, nor an old man who does not complete his days. For the youth dies 100 years old, but the sinner being 100 years old shall be lightly esteemed. What does that mean? All right, so 19 and 20. In this world, there's crying all the time because of money and lawyers and all the things that Godriel gives authority. When Yahuwah destroys this world and instead remakes it, it will be like the time of the ancients when people lived 1,000 years. Read Genesis. People lived 1,000 years, right? This 100-year lifespan we have at the max is a curse. And when they died, it wasn't physical disintegration, but rather they just changed state in the blink of an eye because they were ready to move to a different state. So the new earth and the new heavens are going to be very, very different, and this world will not be remembered because it's corrupted by Godriel and his fallen angels, which is what's described in Enoch. So we're going to get to Enoch in just a minute. Okay, moving on. Verse 21, and they shall build houses and inhabit them, and plant vineyards and eat their fruit. They shall not build and another inhabit. They shall not plant and another eat. For the days of my people are going to be as the days of a tree, and my chosen ones outlive the work of their hands. And what does that mean? Well, in this world, people don't build their own houses. Money rules. Basically, you pay other people, and then you live in the house that you pay them to build. So if you have money, well, you can do whatever you want. And you can buy other people's fruit. You were not the ones who grew that fruit. Other people grew that fruit. But what that means is the people who actually did the work don't get the satisfaction of the work of their hands. You do, because we live in a world ruled by money. But in Yahuwah's world, that's not the case. You get the satisfaction from your labors, and your labors are not in vain. It is about the soul. The chosen equals servants. And these chosen ones outlive the work of their hands. The work of their hands is the ministry. And once Yahuwah establishes this new world, you will not have to work in order to live in that world like you do in Godriel's world. So let's move on. 23. They shall not labor in vain, nor bring forth children for trouble, for they are the seed of the blessed of Yahuwah, and their offspring with them. So he's talking about literal children and spiritual children here. We are the sons of prophets and their followers. Calamity is a result of covenant curses, and these do not apply to the spiritual children of the prophets and the chosen. And because of who they are, they will not forget about Yahuwah this time like they did in Gadriel's world. It is a special lineage. Because they will be blessed and the blessings are bestowed upon their children, their blessings accrue to the children as well. This is what happens with blessing and curses. They're intergenerational. Your grandfather might have been cursed and it is passed down to the children. But if your grandfather is blessed, the blessing is also passed down to the children and the grandchildren. This is stated in the Bible, and people don't read it. Okay, 24, 25. And it shall be that before they call, I answer, and while they are still speaking, I hear. Right now, people don't call on his name. They pray and he doesn't answer. We talked about the threefold blessing in chapter 58 of Isaiah and what it takes to qualify for the first part of blessing where he answers you, and the second part of blessing where he's with you continually. Well, now these are his chosen, so he is with them continually. Before they call, he answers, and while they're still speaking, he hears them. Right? Wolf and lamb feed together. A lion eats straw as an ox, and dust is the snake's food. They shall do no evil nor destroy in all my set-apart mountains, says Yahuwah. All of the unclean animals become like clean animals. All people remaining will become his covenant people. All the ones that are remaining, that are not destroyed, become holy. Right? The serpent that was harmful before becomes harmless. All who live on his mountain will be holy in this future new earth. All right, so let's move on from 65 and go to 66. Thus said Yahuwah, the heavens are my throne and the earth is my footstool. Where is this house that you build for me, and where is this place of my rest? And all these my hands have made, and all these that exist, declare Yahuwah. Yet to such a one I look, on him who is poor and bruised of spirit, who trembles at my word. So what he is saying here is that he is the creator of all, and he will not confine himself. Gadriel wants to put him in a box, and he will not be put in a box. He will not confine himself. In this new earth and new heaven, pronounce his name, and he appears, because the holy can withstand his appearance. But we are too corrupted to withstand his appearance. If he were to appear to us, we would literally burn in flame because we are too corrupted in this world. But in this new world, we will not be corrupted. And if we pronounce his name, he will appear to us. He will have his temple on the earth. The whole earth will be his footstool, and the heavens his throne. He dwells with those who are humble, refreshes the spirits of the lowly. Who are vigilant for his word that he's talking about here? The ones that tremble. Those are the prophets. But whoever slaughters the bull slays a man. Whoever slaughters the lamb breaks a dog's neck. Whoever brings a grain offering, pig's blood. Whoever burns incense blesses an idol. Indeed, they have chosen their own ways, and their being delights in their abominations. Right? What does that mean? It means animal sacrifices are redundant now. The great and eternal sacrifice, that of Messiah being crucified on the cross, has happened. Animal sacrifices are no longer legitimate. I've covered this in previous videos. You know, what the crucifixion did was eliminate the blood sacrifices. It did not nullify the covenant. The covenant was not nailed to the cross with the Messiah. It renewed the covenant with the lost sheep of the house of Israel. It did not void it. And so this is why those of us who consider ourselves still Christian but follow Torah are a group called the Nazarene, because we are restoring the old ways. So for those that don't do that, that decide they're going to follow abominations, like continuing to do animal sacrifice, not realizing the sacrifice of the Messiah, I shall also choose their punishments, says Yahuwah, and bring their fears on them, because I called, but no one answered. I spoke, and they did not hear. And they did evil before my eyes, and chose what was displeasing to me. The reward will be their destruction, something they dread at the time, measure for measure. Right? In fact, when you think of those in the political state of Israel, they mete out revenge measure for measure. Right? These are what these wars are all about. That's not how Yahuwah operates. That's not how his people should operate. Right? And he's saying, you do that, I will bring your fears upon you. He spoke through his servants, the prophets, and none responded. Right? Hear the word of Yahuwah, you who tremble at his word. Your brothers who hate you, who cast you out for my name's sake, said, let Yahuwah be esteemed so that we see your joy. But they are put to shame. So what he's saying is, if you are vigilant, you will hear. Your brethren that are in authority, because they're in the world and they have money and they're operating under the authority of Gadriel, they make you outcasts. Just like in the time of Yeshua, when the Pharisees made Yeshua an outcast. This goes back to Isaiah chapter 49, where the people despise the servant because of he is trying to esteem Yahuwah's name. But they're not worshiping Yahuwah. They're worshiping Gadriel and the world of money. And this is why Yeshua says, you cannot serve two masters. The oppressors are looking for a sign, and they mock the elect. The elect suffer it for others, just like the proxy Hezekiah. And this is a theme in the Bible. It's that you suffer humiliation before exaltation, not the opposite. Right now, the wicked ones are being exalted because they're the ones with money and power. But when Yahuwah exercises his judgment, they will be humiliated. So right now they're being exalted, and they will then be humiliated. Well, the Kodesh ones are being humiliated now, but in the time of Yahuwah, they will be exalted. This is what, when Messiah says, the meek shall inherit the earth, it's exactly what he's saying. They're being humiliated now, the meek and the humble, but when Yahuwah's kingdom comes, they will be exalted. So let's go and read 6 and 7. A roaring sound from the city, a voice from the Hekal, a voice of Yahuwah repaying his enemies. Before she labored, she gave birth. Before a pain came to her, she was delivered of a male child. He is speaking to the brethren leadership. It starts with his own house. If you are a prophet of Yahuwah, you need to be faithful. And if you have to suffer for it, then you suffer. Yahuwah intercedes and intervenes. The woman he's talking about is Sion. It is the new earth and the new Jerusalem. Who has heard of like this? Who has seen the like of these? Is a land brought forth in one day? Is a nation born at once? For as soon as Sion labored, she gave birth to her children. It's a new birth on a higher spiritual ladder. Right? The wicked are given a chance and they fail, and thus they are destroyed. The very thing they think they are doing to the righteous, meaning mocking them, persecuting them, and ultimately killing them, is going to end up happening to them. Because the tables are going to be turned on them by Yahuwah. Sion, meaning the new earth, and the new Jerusalem are born on that day with the rest of the children. So this TSI spelling versus this Z spelling, it's not, again, a political movement or an ism. It is this future state that Isaiah is talking about in the future. Shall I bring to birth and not give delivery, says Yahuwah? Shall I who give delivery restrain birth, said your Elohim? Rejoice with Jerusalem and be glad with her, all of you who love her. Rejoice greatly with her, all of you who mourn for her. And this is not the city in the Middle East. This is his people occupying his city in the future after he exercises judgment. It implies that people are resisting this idea of a new birth. The birth has already happened. The morning happened first. So this birthing is going on, and people are duping themselves into saying that it isn't, and they're still believing in money and all these things that are happening. But Yahuwah is going to take all that apart very, very soon. You mourn for her, so that you feed and shall be satisfied with the breast of her comforts, so that you drink deeply and shall delight yourselves in her overflowing esteem. His people will be comforted, and they will have abundance. Verse 12, for thus said Yahuwah, see, I am extending peace to her like a river, and the esteem of the Gentiles like a flowing stream. This can be nations. And you shall feed, you shall be carried on the side, and be fondled on her knees. As one whom his mother comforts, so I comfort you. And in Jerusalem you are comforted. So what this means, peace like a river, I'm not going to get into that. That's a word linked to a previous chapter that describes what's going on there. Nations will come to them, meaning those that are in the world, the Goyim. We shall have a group in Zion, the elect. There is another that did not go in the Exodus. They go back on the day of judgment. And we'll talk about when that is. The day of judgment is not now. And you shall see, and your heart shall rejoice, and your bones flourish as tender grass, and the hand of Yahuwah shall be known to his servants, and his displeasure to his enemies. This was discussed in this Isaiah study, and it is a decimation motif. That means of the people alive at this time, when his displeasure is foisted on his enemies, 90% will be killed, 9% will be saved, 1% will get direct intervention in an exodus. Those are his elect and his remnant. These being the middle group. So we said the three groups: the wicked group, which are a pretty big group, the middle group, meaning the Zion group, and then the elect, or this group. For look, Yahuwah comes with fire and his chariots like a whirlwind, to render his displeasure with burning and his rebuke with flames of fire. For by fire and by his sword Yahuwah shall judge all flesh, and the slain of Yahuwah shall be many. Fire is a personification of the king of Assyria. The king of Assyria, and we discussed who that figure is the one who brings fire, a Sodom and Gomorrah type of destruction, on behalf of Yahuwah. He's the first one to bring fire, and then Yahuwah brings holy fire. Those who set themselves apart and cleanse themselves at the gardens after one in the midst, eating flesh of pigs and the abominations and the mouse, are snatched away together, declares Yahuwah. Cultists, Satanists will be destroyed. They're unclean physically and spiritually. If the king of Assyria doesn't get them, the holy fire surely will. All right, moving on in chapter 66. And I, because of their works and imaginations, am coming together all nations and tongues, and they shall come and see my esteem, says Yahuwah. There are those in the world that will be gathered. And I shall set a sign among them, and shall send some of those who escape to the nations, Tarshish and Pul and Lud, I won't get to that, who draw the bow, and Tubal and Yawan, which is basically Iran, the coastlands afar off, who have not heard my report nor seen my esteem, and they shall declare my esteem among the nations. The second gathering of the middle category, this middle category that I talked about, the ones in salvation, the middle category will be gathered by the elect. These are the harvests that we are talking about. This was the separation, the sealing of the elect versus the slating for judgment of the wicked. There's this category in the middle that's caught between. Because they have endured, this middle category now merit Yahuwah's protection. They get the same mark that the elect get in Revelation. They have power over the elements, and thus they will be able to withstand Yahuwah's presence, his glory. And from them too I shall take for priests, declares Yahuwah. This middle category, their sins will be wiped out. They will be elevated like the elect, but not at the same time. For as the new heavens and the new earth that I make stand before me, declares Yahuwah, so your seed and your name shall stand. And it shall be that from new moon to new moon, and from Shabbat to Shabbat, all flesh shall come to worship before me, declares Yahuwah. We do not even keep his Shabbats now. There's a very small number of people who keep his actual Shabbat. In contrast to those who were cut off and get covenant curse, the offspring of Babylon are gone. All through the millennium, the remainder worship Yahuwah. This millennium is the 1,000-year reign where the elect and the saved will reign with Yahushua HaMashiach, the Messiah, in Yahweh Shama. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. And they shall go forth and look upon the corpses of the men who have transgressed against me, for their worm shall not die, and their fire not be quenched, and they shall be repulsive to all flesh. He says this before, that their names will be remembered as a curse. So the contrast between the righteous and the wicked. The fate of the wicked is a remembrance for the righteous. So they will not forget Yahuwah this time, because they see what happened to the wicked, and it will be everlasting. Alrighty. So now, you may still have questions, and I know this is going to be a long video, but this is all hanging together. So the next part of this that I was told to cover is in the book of Enoch. Why the book of Enoch? Well, the book of Enoch is super interesting, and the reason for it is that, as I've said, and the reason for covering these 12 chapters in Isaiah is told what will happen by Yahuwah, and he writes it down. Enoch is told why it will happen. So in Isaiah, he writes what will happen and writes it down. Enoch discusses the why, and then Revelation says the how and the when. So all of these things hang together, and you have to look at them all together in their context. So let's get into the book of Enoch, which in Hebrew is Hanok. I am linking to the Hallelujah Scriptures version of the book of Enoch, and so you can find it. And now, when you read the book of Enoch, and you can just download the PDF because it's freely distributed, you will see why those who want to corrupt the Bible would remove this book. And you would see why Yahushua the Messiah would refer to this book in his ministry, so that we would know that this book existed and go try and find it. Because it talks about what happened at the beginning, that Yahuwah created the heavens and the earth, just like in Genesis, but that there were these watchers, and they came, and instead of following Yahuwah's will, they corrupted the earth. And so I'm not going to read all of these, but what he says essentially that they went and bound themselves with mutual curses on the top of Mount Hermon, and he lists the name of these fallen angels that have caused the fall of the earth to take place, and how they took human women and by making them pregnant created great giants. Again, this is recounted in Genesis. You can read Genesis and it says the same thing. It's just that there's an awful lot more detail in Enoch. So basically this describes the discussion that the archangels are having with Yahuwah about the fact that these fallen angels are corrupting Yahuwah's creation on the earth, and what the holy courts want to do about this. And so it is written in the book of Enoch, and so you can read all of this, but I'm just going to sort of cut to the chase and get to the parts that really matter for our analysis here. So first, if we go to chapter 14 of the book of Enoch, it will say, just like the vision that John has in Revelation, that he received a vision, he fell on his face, and he saw a vision. There was a second house greater than the former. The entire portal stood open before me, and it was built of flames of fire. So there's a portal connecting wherever Enoch is standing with the heavens, and it is a portal made of fire. And in every respect it so excelled in splendor and magnificence and extent that I cannot describe to you its splendor and its extent. Its floor was of fire, and above it were lightnings, and the path of the stars and its ceiling were also flaming fire. And I looked and saw therein a high throne, its appearance as crystal, and the wheels thereof as the shining sun. And there was the vision of cherubim. And from underneath the throne came streams of flaming fire, so that I could not look upon it. And the great esteem sat upon it, and his garments shone more brightly than the sun, and were whiter than any snow. None of the messengers could enter and look upon his face because of the magnificence and esteem, and no flesh could look upon him. Right, so Enoch is describing seeing Yahuwah sitting upon his great white throne in his garments that are whiter than any snow and brighter than the sun. And so then it is revealed to him what they shall do. And so the watchers know that Enoch is greatly blessed by the Most High, and they know that he is a scribe and a prophet, and they ask him to intervene with Yahuwah and beg for mercy. And basically Yahuwah tells Enoch, no, they did not consider the consequences for what they're doing, telling them they can pound sand. And this is said in chapter 16 of Enoch. So this chapter 16 is what happens in the beginning, the why, what is described in Isaiah 65 and 66 needs to happen under the law of justice. This here in Enoch 16 is the declaration that the wicked will have no peace due to what they have done because of the consequences of their actions. Because under the law of justice, justice must be meted out for what they have done. Yahuwah's justice is perfect. He cannot accept them from it. What he is doing with mercy for the humans of the earth is sparing us from the consequences of the actions of these fallen angels, because they have deceived us. And so he set up a way for us to be saved out of that. It is because we do not merit the consequences that are falling upon us. But those consequences do fall on those fallen angels that made this choice. And that is what he says to Enoch here. From the days of the slaughter and destruction and death of the giants, from the beings of whose flesh the spirits, having gone forth, shall destroy without incurring judgment, thus shall they destroy until the day of the complete end. That day of the complete end, the final judgment day, the great judgment in which the age shall be ended, over the watchers and the wicked, even so shall be completely ended. So there is an end date that will happen when this judgment is meted out. And now, as to the watchers who have sent you to intercede for them, so these are the fallen angels, the watchers, they were sent here to watch over the earth. Instead, they corrupted the earth, and they asked Enoch to intercede with Yahuwah for them. So Yahuwah says to Enoch, and now as to the watchers who have sent you to intercede for them, who had been previously in the Shamayim, the heavens, say to them, he's instructing Enoch on his behalf as the prophet to say to these fallen angels, you have been in the Shamayim, the heavens, but all the mysteries had not yet been revealed to you, and you knew worthless matters, and these in the hardness of your hearts you have made known to the women, and through these mysteries women and men work much evil on earth. Say to them, therefore, you have no peace. Thus, there is no peace for the wicked, declares Yahuwah. And under the law of justice, they will be destroyed as a consequence of corrupting the earth. So what happens in the end? This is the declaration that the wicked will be judged based off on these offenses. So he says they will have no peace, and it will end this way because of the law of justice. And I went from there to the middle of the earth, And I saw a baruk, a blessed place in which there were trees and branches abiding and blooming. And I saw a Kodesh mountain, set apart, holy. And underneath the mountain to the east there was a stream, and it flowed towards the south. And I saw towards the east another mountain higher than this, and between them a deep and narrow ravine, which also ran underneath the mountain. And to the west of there was another mountain, lower than the former. So there's surrounded by mountains all around. And there's a deep ravine. And all the ravines were deep and narrow of hard rock, and trees were not planted there. So it's a barren place. And I marveled at the rocks, and I marveled at the ravine. Truly, I marveled very much. And I said to the angel that was with him, for what object is this Baruch land, which is entirely filled with trees, and this accursed valley between? Then Uriel, one of the archangels, Kodesh messengers, set apart messengers, angels, who was with me, answered and said, this accursed valley is for those who are accursed forever, the fallen angels. Here shall all the accursed be gathered together, who utter with their lips against Yahuwah indecent words, and of his esteem speak harshness. Here shall they be gathered together, and here shall their place of judgment in the last days. There shall be upon them in the spectacle of righteous judgments, in the presence of the righteous forever. So they will be gathered, and they will be judged in this valley. All right. So we've covered Isaiah and the book of Enoch, and so you can see we have the fallen angels who were the watchers, who asked Enoch to intervene for them. They were told to pound sand by the Most High. He declared that they will have no peace and will be judged for their actions. And then after the earth is cleansed, he will remake it with fire, so there will be a new earth and a new heaven, and this complete mess will be forgotten forever, and he will no longer see the sins that were done here. So I guess another way of putting that was that time is actually not something that really exists. Time was created so he could solve this problem. Time is something that we see because we are bound in this 3D reality that we're in. But in the Most High's reality, it's everlasting. The time does not apply. It is outside time. So we need to talk now about the new earth, the new heaven, Revelation, which describes these, and the New Jerusalem and its relationship. And then we'll finish up talking about what happens, because what will happen is this new earth and new heaven and New Jerusalem, these are all 1,000 years from now. Because what happens between now, the end of days, and then is the 1,000-year reign, when we reign with the returned Messiah in Yahweh Shama, which is the holy place that is made in the earth and protected. And we'll show you really interesting stuff about that as part of this study. So stay with me and hang with me. It's going to get even better. Now, what's interesting about this is if you ask AI about the New Jerusalem, it will tell you, because it has, it has these sources. It'll say, yeah, sure, we'll talk. I'll tell you all about the New Jerusalem in the book of Revelation. It is measured. It's 12,000 stadia in all three directions, length, width, and height, which is 1,400 miles. 1,400 miles. So basically, AI trying to give you an idea of that will say, imagine a city stretching from Canada to Mexico, and from the Mississippi River all the way to the West Coast, and that is New Jerusalem. And not only that, it's not only 1,400 miles by 1,400 miles, it's also 1,400 miles tall. So that is pretty wild. Now, New Jerusalem is in Revelation, and we're going to read those chapters. But the proxy for that in the 1,000 years is described in the book of Ezekiel. All right, moving on. Let's read Revelation 20, which talks about this new heaven and new earth 1,000 years from now. And then we will back up to what happens in the meantime, right after the end of days, setting up the 1,000-year reign. So this is describing now what happens at the end. So actually, this starts with where we are now. And I saw a messenger coming down from the heaven, having the key to the pit of the deep and a great chain in his hand. And he seized the dragon, that serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. And he threw him into the pit of the deep and shut him up and set a seal on him so that he should lead the nations no more astray until the 1,000 years were ended. So this is the 1,000-year reign that we're talking about, where there is a proxy for New Jerusalem called Yahweh Shama. And after that, he has to be released for a little while, at the end of the 1,000 years. And once he's released, that's when that final judgment that Enoch talked about will happen. And I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was given to them. And the lives of those who had been beheaded because of the witness they bore to Yahushua, and because of the word of Elohim, and who did not worship the beast nor his image, and did not receive his mark upon their foreheads or upon their hands. And they lived and reigned with Mashiach for 1,000 years. So the elect, those who did not receive the mark of the beast, lived and reigned with the Messiah for 1,000 years. So that is the 1,000-year reign that I'm talking about. And the dead did not come to life until 1,000 years were ended. Anyway, this is the first resurrection. Blessed and set apart, Kodesh, is the one having a part in the first resurrection. The second death possesses no authority over these, but they shall be priests of Elohim and of the Messiah, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. Right? So that's all of this. They shall reign for 1,000 years. That is the 1,000-year reign that I am talking about. When the 1,000 years have ended, Satan shall be released from his prison, and he shall go out and lead the nations astray, which are the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, together for battle, whose number is as the sands of the sea. So the entire earth will be led to battle in those days. All right, so let's look at what's happening here. So I was actually told I need to create a timeline for this. So we have the book of Isaiah talking about what will happen in this time, the end of days, with the dichotomy of the wicked and the holy, where the wicked get more wicked and the holy, also called the Kodesh, get more holy. And it's a chiasm, a dichotomy. These two groups end up making themselves more distinct from one another during this period of the end of days, which is where we are now. So now this diagram is a little inaccurate in that the end of days is included in the 6,000 years, but I just thought it would be easier to put it this way. Otherwise, I'd have to start nesting these things. And anyway, it's not to scale. The end of days is actually part of the 6,000 years, but just for the purpose of this diagram, I'm making it separate so it's clearer. So the book of Enoch describes the why and the judgment that befalls these fallen angels, which is what sets up this entire thing, and how the end of days sets up the judgment when they are put away for 1,000 years, and we reign with the Messiah in Yahuwah Shama, which is a city that is named Yahuwah is there. That's what Yahuwah Shama in Hebrew is. And that is for 1,000 years. And what I just read in chapter 20 of Revelation is how and when that happens, right? So that is we just described the 1,000-year reign, right? So now we've gone from the end of days, where we are now, to this 1,000-year reign. So now what? All right, let's go back into the Ezekiel that I described that describes Yahuwah Shama. So Ezekiel chapters 40 through 48 describe what this place, Yahuwah Shama, looks like. And it's 8 chapters, so it's quite a description. And what's interesting about when you look at this description, if you take this, and you can see Copilot again, this is an AI. If you feed all of those 8 chapters into an AI and ask it questions about it, right? You take these chapters of Ezekiel and just paste them into this AI and say, draw a picture of what it says. You'll get something that looks like this, right? So this is the protected place that the remnant dwell with the Messiah during the 1,000-year reign, while Satan and the fallen angels are kept captive to be judged at the end of the 1,000 years. So this is one picture of it. Here's another picture. And, this is just AI looking at those chapters in the Bible and drawing what they describe. So pretty interesting. Pretty interesting use of that to give you a mental image of what Yahuwah Shama looks like. Okay, so moving on to the next verses in Revelation 20. And they came up over the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of the set-apart ones and beloved city. And fire came down from Elohim out of the heaven and consumed them. So anyone who threatens Yahweh Shama, fire comes down out of the heavens and destroys them. So this is a protected city that is, I think, the size of the New Jerusalem. But it's a proxy, because the New Jerusalem does not happen until the 1,000 years are over. And the devil who led them astray was thrown in the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet are. And they shall be tortured day and night forever and ever. And I saw a great white throne, and him who was sitting on it. So remember, Enoch described this great white throne and the Most High who was sitting on it, again, in his robes that were brighter than the sun and whiter than the whitest snow, right? From whose face the earth and heaven fled away, and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, small and great, standing before the throne, and the books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life, and the dead were judged from what was written in the books according to their works. So those of you who follow this whole thing of grace and that you are saved by grace and you won't be judged according to your work, the Bible says you are judged according to your works, right? You will be saved out of this, but ultimately your heart will be your judge, right? So if you have hate in your heart, and right, what the way that you act is based on that. Those who have hate, this is the reason the Messiah told us to love one another, is that if we did that, we would be kind to one another. And kindness, in chapter 58 of Isaiah, is the litmus test for the first condition of blessing. And we covered this in a past video. But that's the whole point. So we are judged according to our works. And it says that here. And if your works are good, you're in the book of life. And so those who say that the old covenant was nailed to the cross with the Messiah, you're just dead wrong. It says so right here. And so this is the great white throne judgment. That is what is being described here. When Yahuwah, the Most High, sitting on the great white throne, throws open the books and judges the living and the dead. And the sea gave up the dead who were in it, and the death and the grave gave up the dead who were in them, and they were judged, each one according to his works. And the death and the grave were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death. If the second death applies to you because you are wicked, you are destroyed along with all of these things in the lake of fire. But death and the grave themselves are thrown in the lake of fire. So after this great white throne judgment is meted out, there is no more death, and there is no more grave. And if anyone was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. So all corruption will be expunged, and the earth will be remade with fire, and the heavens will be remade with fire. So what happens? Let's go back to our timeline. So now here we have, again, Yahweh Shama in the 1,000-year reign, where the remnant is reigning with the Messiah. And after that, we have the great white throne judgment. After the judgment, the earth and the heavens are cleansed and made new, and we have a new heaven and a new earth. And then we also get a new Jerusalem. And this is what's described next in Revelation. Chapter 21. And I saw a renewed heaven and a renewed earth, for the former heaven and the former earth had passed away, and the sea is no more. And I, John, saw the set-apart city, renewed Jerusalem, or New Jerusalem, coming down out of the heaven from Elohim, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the heaven saying, See, the booth, tabernacle of Elohim is with men, and he shall dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and Elohim himself shall be with them and be their Elohim. And Elohim shall wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, nor mourning, nor crying, and there shall be no more pain, and the former matters have passed away. And he who was sitting on the throne said, "See, I make all matters new." And he said to me, "Write, for these words are true and trustworthy." So he's saying that to John. And he said to me, "It is finished. I am the Aleph and the Tav, the beginning and the end. To the one who thirsts I shall give the fountain of the water of life without payment. The one who overcomes shall inherit all this, and I shall be his Elohim, and he shall be my son. But as for the cowardly and untrustworthy and abominable and murderers and those who whore and drug sorcerers," so that's the sorcery we're talking about, pharmakia, "and idolaters and all the false, their part is in the lake which burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death, declares Yahuwah. And one of the 7 messengers who held the 7 bowls filled with the 7 last plagues came to me and spoke with me, saying, Come, I shall show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. And he carried me away in the spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me the great city, the set-apart Jerusalem, descending out of the heaven from Elohim. Having the esteem of Elohim, and her light was like a most precious stone, like a jasper stone, clear as crystal, and having a great and high wall, having 12 gates, and at the gates 12 messengers and names written on them, which are those of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. 3 gates on the east, 3 gates on the north, 3 gates on the south, and 3 gates on the west. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the names of the 12 emissaries of the Lamb. And he who spoke with me had a golden measuring rod to measure the city, and its gates and its wall. And the city lies 4-cornered, and its length is as great as its breadth. And he measured the city with the rod, 2,200 kilometers, which is not what's written in the Hebrew. It's 12,000 stadia, but they just translated it this way. The length and the breadth and the height are equal, and he measured the wall 65 meters according to the measure of a man, that is, of a messenger, meaning the thickness of the wall. And the structure of its wall was jasper, and the city was clean gold like clear glass. So they're trying to describe the New Jerusalem, and it's indescribable. Right? It's not even a 3D thing. We'll talk about that in just a second. So this New Jerusalem that they're describing connects the new earth, which is remade by fire, and the new heaven. And this New Jerusalem is indescribable. And for me to explain it, I have to go back to some things that were discovered a while back. Before I do that, let's get into the description in Revelation 21 of this New Jerusalem. And then I will try and make some sense of what the New Jerusalem is and how it connects the new earth and the new heaven. And the foundations of the wall of the city were adorned with all kinds of precious stone. The first foundation, jasper, the second, sapphire, the third, agate, the fourth. What they're basically doing is they're listing all of the precious jewels that were on the ephod that the high priest wore. Basically saying that what was once limited to the high priest is now the entire city where all of the people of Yahuwah live, right? Basically, what used to be just a tiny little thing in the Holy of Holies that the high priest wore is now 1,400 miles by 1,400 miles by 1,400 miles. It's indescribably beautiful. And I saw no dwelling place in it, meaning the Mishkan, the Holy of Holies. There is no Holy of Holies because for Yahuwah El Shaddai is its dwelling place and the Lamb, meaning the whole city is a place where the Most High can dwell. There does not have to be a Holy of Holies so that the earth does not get consumed by holy fire, because the whole earth has been cleansed, and now the New Jerusalem, the entire extensive New Jerusalem, are subject. Like we said in Isaiah, you speak his name and he appears, because anywhere in the New Jerusalem there is no corruption, and anyone who speaks to Yahuwah's name, he will appear. And he dwells with us, right? And so the way to get to him is through the Messiah. But once you have passed through that portal, now we are dwelling with him. So we dwell with the Messiah in Yahuwah Shama for 1,000 years. And then after the great white throne judgment and all evil is destroyed and the heavens and the earth are remade new, then we get back to the original state where we dwell with Elohim. And we do no longer need a proxy because we have been cleansed of all corruption. Hallelujah. And the city had no need of a sun nor of the moon to shine in it, for the esteem of Elohim lightened it, and the Lamb is its lamp. And the nations of those who are saved shall walk in its light, and the sovereigns of the earth bring their esteem to it. And its gates shall not be shut at all by day, for night shall not be there. Night will no longer exist, because we will not need lights, and there will be no moon, because there will be no light, because it's a new heaven and a new earth. And they shall bring the esteem and the appreciation of the nations into it, and there shall be by no means enter into it whatever is unclean, neither anyone doing abomination and falsehood, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life. So, to understand this new earth and the new Jerusalem that connects the new earth to the new heaven, I have to bring up something that was discovered by the code searcher Chris Ray somewhere between 4 and 5 years ago in a Bible code study class. I think after the actual class, we were discussing this verse that he found, because he was looking at the Mishkan, and which is the dwelling place of Yahuwah in the time of the Israelites before they broke the covenant. And this describes the veil around that Holy of Holies in the Mishkan. And it describes the sheets that are around this holy place, and it uses this adjective in the Hebrew, idolf, which translates to superfluidity, and it's describing the sheets that extend over the tabernacle, and it uses this word in Hebrew, tau samek resh het, which is a transliteration of the English word tesseract, which is a 4-dimensional hypercube, where the 3-dimensional shadow of it is a cube, equal length, width, and height. And so New Jerusalem, as viewed in the earth, is the shadow of the New Jerusalem, which is a 4-dimensional object known as a tesseract, which is a hypercube. All right, so this gets a little deep because we have 3 dimensions of space, and then the 4th dimension is time. So the 4th dimension is space-time. And just like you have 3 dimensions. If you have a light source like the sun, and you hold up a 3-dimensional object and cast its shadow onto a surface, that shadow is 2-dimensional. So 3-dimensional objects cast 2-dimensional shadows. New Jerusalem, as a 4-dimensional object, for those on the earth, see it as a 3-dimensional shadow of the New Jerusalem. And what it's doing is it is a portal that connects the new earth with the new heavens. And I cannot really, this is beyond human understanding what that heavens are like. They are definitely higher dimensions than our dimension. But this Tesseract definitely describes the New Jerusalem, and I suspect that the new earth is still 3 dimensions. The New Jerusalem is 4-dimensional and connects the new earth with the new heavens, and the new heavens are 5-dimensional. And so it's this traveling between the dimensions via the portals inside the New Jerusalem that allows us to experience the Most High. But it cannot take place during corruption, because anything corrupted will be destroyed by holy fire instantly. It's just the nature of that higher reality. All right, so I won't claim that I know what that's like, but I will claim that I can provide a proof of the fact that this notion of a 4-dimensional tesseract is the thing that is New Jerusalem. And so when Chris Ray found this, and he may publish a video, he sent me the code table, but I do not have the interpretation of it, because he was given that interpretation, so he might publish that again and provide his interpretation. But when he looked at that code table, he was describing the Holy of Holies as a tesseract. And so that when the high priest, when Yahuwah walked with the Israelites before they broke the covenant, right, after Exodus, while they were still in his good graces before breaking the covenant, when the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies and put on the ephod, what Chris had speculated was, because this Holy of Holies was a Tesseract and it was outside of three-dimensional time, it would the high priest would literally be transported into the heavens and still be on earth simultaneously, so that he could converse with Yahuwah. And so this notion that the dwelling place of Yahuwah is a Tesseract is what Chris did as a table. And his access term for that table, which again I'm not going to show you here because it's not my table, and although I don't think Chris would mind, I don't really have the interpretation, so if he wants to publish that, I'll link to it in the comments and pin it. His interpretation was that this Holy of Holies is a Tesseract, and that's what the high priest would enter into. And in fact, the access term he found was from the Tesseract of Yahuwah, and it was encoded in the book of Deuteronomy, where the dwelling place was described. So, how do we then link this notion of a Tesseract with the New Jerusalem? Well, if you look in Revelation 22, where it describes the New Jerusalem, in that place is encoded the Tesseract. Now, in Chris's word, this is sufficient, I think, for what he was trying to say, but for me, a correct transliteration of Tesseract wouldn't stop at the ch, it would stop with the t, Tesseract. And so I looked for both a tet and a taw after this, and found both encoded at different skips. So this is the one with the tet at the end. Hey, meaning the Tesseract, encoded here with the covenant, describing the New Jerusalem, the manifestation of the covenant once evil is destroyed. And you can see that when I click this tau in this table, it describes the New Jerusalem, and in the middle of its broad avenue and near the river on its side, and on there was the tree of life, which bore 12 fruits of each month, and the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. Right? So that we'll read Revelation 22 in just a minute, but you'll see it's describing the New Jerusalem. That's not the only place. There's another one here in Revelation 19:17. That says, I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the fowls and the fly that in the midst of heaven, come ye, assemble to this great supper of Elohim. Right? So that is the Tesseract again, and this is the covenant, and this is that word superfluidity, which describes the Tesseract. All right? And it's encoded in these chapters of Revelation to describe what happens after the judgment when we have the new heaven, the new earth, and the New Jerusalem. So let's read Revelation 22. And he showed me a river of water of life, clear as crystal, coming from the throne of Elohim and of the Lamb. And in the middle of its street, and this is where that was encoded, I just read it to you, and on the other side of the river was the tree of life, which bore 12 fruits, each tree yielding its fruit every month, and the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. And no longer shall there be any curse, and the throne of Elohim and of the Lamb shall be in it, and his servants shall serve him. And they shall see his face, and his name shall be upon their foreheads. And night shall be no more, and they shall have no need of a lamp or the light of the sun. So this is describing, again, the New Jerusalem, because Yahuwah Elohim shall give them light, and they shall reign forever and ever. Now, the reason I'm underlining it is I'm going to show you another code table where this is where the term is encoded, this verse right here. And he said to me, these words are trustworthy and true, and Yahuwah Elohim of the set-apart prophets has sent his messenger to show his servants what has to take place with speed. See, I am coming speedily. Blessed is he who guards the words of this prophecy of this book. And I, Yohanan, John, saw and heard these matters, and when I heard and saw, I fell down to worship before the feet of the messenger who showed me these matters. And he said to me, see, do not, for I am your fellow servant, and of your brothers the prophets, and of those who are guarding the words of this book. Worship only Elohim. And he said to me, do not seal the words of this prophecy of this book, because the time is near, speaking to us in the end of days. And this is the table where in Revelation 22 verse 5, describing the New Jerusalem, where we will need no light because there will be no darkness, is the word the Tesseract. And this is the version with the tau at the end of it. So this is He and then Tesseract ending with the tau. Encoded in that same place, Revelation 22 verse 5. So with that, let's read the last part of Revelation 22, which will conclude this study. He who does wrong, let him do more wrong. He who is filthy, let him be more filthy. He who is righteous, let him be more righteous. He who is set apart, let him be more set apart. We talked about the dichotomy of the wicked and the righteous in Isaiah. This is reflected now in the last chapter of Revelation. And see, I am coming speedily, and my reward is with me to give to each according to his work. Right? I am the Aleph and the Tav, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Blessed are those doing his commands, so that the authority shall be theirs unto the tree of life, and to enter through the gates into the city. But outside are the dogs, and those who enchant with drugs, and those who whore, and the murderers, and the idolaters, and all who love and do falsehood. I, Yahushua, have sent my messengers to witness to you these matters in the assemblies. You could say the churches. I am the root and the offspring of David, the bright and morning star. And the Spirit and the bride say, come. And he who hears, let him say, come. And he who thirsts, come. And he who desires it, take the water of life without paying. For I witness to everyone hearing the words of the prophecy of this book. If anyone adds to them, Elohim shall add to him the plagues that are written in this book. And if anyone takes away from the words of this book of this prophecy, Elohim shall take away his part from the book of life and out of the set apart city which are written in this book. He that bears witness of these matters says, yes, I am coming speedily. Amen. Yes, come, Master Yahushua. The favor of our Master Yahushua Messiah be with the set apart ones, the Kodesh. Amen. And with that, brothers and sisters, with that hopeful last word coming directly from our Messiah, I will leave you with the last generated picture of Yahweh Shama in the 1,000-year reign before the white throne judgment, when the new Jerusalem descends to connect the new earth with the new heavens. And with that, our study of the book of Isaiah is concluded, and I hope this has greatly blessed and baruched you, and I will see you in the next video, whenever that might be. Shalom all.